Welcome to Live Your Balance, a podcast for busy humans who are curious about taking a step back from overwhelm so that they can create more balance in their lives. Hello and welcome back to Live Your Balance. We're here for episode 2 and today we have some good stuff in store for you. First off, I'm going to spend a few minutes chatting to you about our feature, How Does She Do It? And then for our actual feature of How Does She Do It, we'll be speaking to Kat Horrocks, who's a women's life coach and an all-round good egg. And then we'll be chatting about how journaling and writing can be really helpful for creating balance in your life. So we've got a really juicy episode coming up for you today, and I can't wait to get into it. So I wanted to take this opportunity today to chat about our feature, How Does She Do It? How Does She Do It is what I think makes this podcast unique. It's an interview that's not quite an interview. And when I was coming up with my thoughts and ideas for the podcast, I was trying to stay mindful of the fact that I try to balance everything that I do in a really busy life. I work full time, I have a side hustle, I have relationships and friends that I want to keep hold of and spend time with. And so when I was creating the structure for the podcast, I wanted to hold that in mind. And as much as I really wanted to interview people and take the time to do that, I was also quite mindful and aware that I have very little time to start with. So I wanted to try and come up with an idea that would serve both me in terms of not being too time intensive, but also make it as accessible as possible for the lovely humans that are giving up their time to come and join us on the Live Your Balance podcast. So the idea of doing the interviews in this way, where it's self-recorded by the guest and then I edit it into the podcast, came from my lovely friend Michelle, who you can find on Instagram at The Unfinished Bookshelf, I believe. I will double check that, but I'm pretty confident that that is where she's at. And Michelle, she's just at Unfinished Bookshelf. Michelle is so good at coming up with amazingly creative ideas. So I spent some time chatting to Michelle about podcasts, and I was talking to her about what my worries were and what my limitations were in terms of time. And she was like, Jordan, I've got it. What about you do this, this, and this? And that was the starting point of How Does She Do It? I then took this to my lovely coach, Holly, and we chatted about it some more. And I was telling her about one of my friends. And you know those people that you have in your life and you just think, oh my goodness, how does she do it? She so effortlessly juggles everything. She's an all-round good human. And from my perspective, I just think she's a superhero. So when I was telling Holly this, she was like, that's it. It's How Does She Do It? That's the name of your feature. So that is How Does She Do It was born. And quite honestly, I think it's a bloody great way for us to get to know how some amazing women live and create their balance, whilst also helping me sustain my own balance, because as you've probably guessed by now, that is something that is really, really important to me. So now that you've got the inside scoop on where it came from, why don't we just dive straight in? Welcome to How Does She Do It, the part of the show where we dive into finding out how our wonderful guest creates and lives her most balanced life. Each guest will answer the same 7 questions each and every week so you can get a really great idea about how she does it, how she creates and lives her balance. Today's guest is Kat Horrocks. I will let her introduce herself, but I just wanted to say that Kat is somebody that I have admired in the online space for quite a number of years. I think I've listened to her podcast, Put Yourself First, pretty much since the get-go. And I think Kat is somebody whose message very much resonates with the message we have here at Live Your Balance around putting yourself first, making time to look after yourself, and balancing your life in the best way that you can while still taking action towards the things that are important to you. I am really excited for you to hear what she's got to say, so let's dive in. Question 1. Who are you? What do you do? And how do you spend your time?
Hi, my name is Kat Horrocks. I'm a women's life coach based in Manchester in the UK. My work is dedicated to empowering women to put themselves first and achieve their goals. So I help them with this through one-to-one coaching, through group coaching, and through my weekly podcast show called Put Yourself First.
Question 2. What do you feel like you're good at when it comes to managing your time, including making time to look after yourself?
I feel like I've always been quite good at making time for myself, making time to look after myself. I know so many women that I work with, that I chat with every day online, in person, struggle with, feelings of guilt, feelings of guilt when it comes to taking time out, feeling pressure, like putting a lot of pressure on themselves. And I definitely handle that. But overall, I feel like I'm good at having a really healthy mindset around setting aside time to look after myself. So I'm very good at making it a non-negotiable part of my day. I'm also very passionate about practicing what I preach, because I am talking about this work all the time. I am the first person to call myself out if I'm ever not doing it. So I think that definitely helps a lot in terms of making sure I stick to it, making sure I'm carving out time, even on the busiest day, to look after myself.
Question 3. What's your biggest challenge when it comes to balance?
I think my biggest challenge is I love what I do. I'm very lucky that I'm at a stage in my life where I can be quite selfish. I often encourage my clients to think about when they can, moments when they can choose to be selfish, because as stigmatized as being selfish is in society, sometimes we really need it. I think because I'm at a phase in life where I have pretty much complete control over my day, over my schedule. I work for myself. I don't have kids. I work at home. I kind of get to call the shots in that way. But in terms of my biggest challenge, I think it is the fact that I love what I do and I'm very career driven. I tend to really prioritise work, and I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to be productive, to show up, to go after my goals, to do all of the things. And I would say that's my biggest challenge. I think when you love what you do so much as well, the challenge is not enjoying the work, because I am looking after myself, I am enjoying myself during the day when I'm working. I think where the balance comes in for me is recognising that even though I love what I do, it's still work, and I still need to switch off, and I still need to spend time off my phone, spend time offline, just get to be Kat, not Kat life coach Kat or Kat podcast host Kat. That's a real challenge to be mindful of that, and to find that line where I need to stop and switch off. So I would say that is a big challenge.
Question 4. What do you do to help you juggle everything that you need to juggle?
So like I said, I'm in a very blessed position to have full kind of authority over my schedule, and I can choose to make time for the things that are important to me, and I also get to say no to the things that aren't important. So I think that's a huge part of it. I read a book last year called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, I think you pronounce his name. That book is such a game changer and really succinctly sums up my philosophy. So I think the first thing when it comes to figuring out how to juggle everything is choosing what is unnecessary. Choosing what you're doing because you feel like you should be doing it, and taking anything off your plate, or taking anything off that priority list that just doesn't need to be on there. And then in terms of balancing the things that are important, I think it's definitely a practical issue in terms of having a really solid system in place, so the decision making is taken out of your hands, because kind of past you has already made decisions and put systems in place to kind of set a foundation for you. That, let's say in my business, I know that on Fridays I do admin and I do bookkeeping, and so I don't have to worry about juggling admin amongst client days, because client days are on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So kind of past Kat has already laid some foundations in place, whether that's a schedule in my week, whether that's like a weekly to-do list, and my kind of Asana board really helps. I think anything you can do to help your future self not have to make decisions is great when it comes to juggling. And I would also say just really embracing the fact that true balance and truly kind of perfectly juggling everything doesn't exist. So forgiving myself if there is a week where I'm really busy with work and I've not got to the gym that much, or I've not left the house some days, forgive, rather than beating myself up and thinking, oh, well, you said you were going to go 3 times this week. Not beating myself up, forgiving myself, and kind of seeing it more as a daily practice, and like, okay, we're out of balance this week, that's absolutely fine. What is within our control to do, and what, can we look at maybe next week to kind of bring that back. So almost like the secret of juggling everything is that you're never going to perfectly juggle everything. And I think that is such giving yourself permission to not be perfect when it comes to having multiple things going on is a really freeing feeling and takes so much pressure off your shoulders.
Question 5. What's your go-to for when you feel overwhelmed?
I have to say a go-to for me is pen and paper, whether that be journaling, whether that be writing a list, whatever I'm specifically overwhelmed by. For me, getting thoughts out of my head and onto a piece of paper is the best thing I can do, because our brains aren't built to have like the amount of information that is running around them in modern day. And so anything running around, anything kind of going around in circles in my brain is just going to really feed that overwhelm, feed that panic. So as much as possible, I try to, recognise I'm feeling overwhelmed and then take steps to get all of that information out of my brain. I think that's, it brings me back to balance a little bit more. And then from there, I can make a decision on what's the next right step. That's something I ask clients a lot when it comes to goal setting, because sometimes if we have so much that we could do, it's really difficult to figure out what we should do. And sometimes you have to just take it one step at a time. Like, what's the next step that I need to take to move forward? What's the, this can be applied to any area of life. What's the next thing I need right now to feel good if you're struggling with your mental health? Or if you're, if you've fallen off your fitness goals, what's the next way, I could move my body today? Could I go for a walk on my lunch break right now? Or could I just stretch for 10 minutes? If it's healthy eating, what's the next meal I could eat? How could I add like an extra portion of fruit or veg to that meal? And I think when you're overwhelmed, you're trying to think like 50 steps ahead, and sometimes you just need to think about the next thing.
Question 6. What's one habit you do to look after yourself every day that's non-negotiable?
First of all, I love this question because I always try to get clients to write their kind of non-negotiable self-care list, and mine is sleep. So sleep has become something I've been preaching about over the past year, and particularly since we bought our first house and moved in, because it's another step of I am fully in control of my routine. I'm in my own home. I sleep as much as I need to. I have that available to me. So some mornings I wake up at 6:30 and I'm awake and I'm up. Some mornings I wake up and I think I need a little bit extra today, and so I'll go back to sleep for an hour. I'm usually up before 8:00, and luckily I work from home so I don't have a commute, but that is a habit that I take time for every day, and that is a habit that is kind of the first thing that I go back to. If that habit has fallen off one day, let's say I've had plans, I've been traveling, I've not slept well the night before, there's always things that can disrupt our sleep. That's one thing where that comes back into play straight away before anything else. So even if it means skipping a workout for the morning, even if it means starting work an hour later, I will move stuff around in my day so that I can sleep. And I know that might sound quite self-indulgent to some people, but sleep is a non-negotiable for me because it positively impacts every single area of my life. I am a nicer person when I am well slept. I am a better partner. I'm a better friend. I'm my most kind of calm, understanding, positive, healthiest version of myself, and I need that to be able to do the work that I do and to just be a good human being to be around. So sleep is a non-negotiable for me.
Question 7. What does creating a balanced life mean to you?
Creating a balanced life to me means checking in with myself every single day and trusting my gut instinct, and moreover from that, acting in my own best interest based on that gut instinct. So a balanced life is, living by my intuition, listening to my body, making decisions based on what I know deep down is right for me. And that can change, in small ways every single day, or it can change in a huge way if it means, changing something drastic or making a huge decision. But for me, a balanced life is listening to my gut, trusting my gut, and not ignoring it and acting on it.
So I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Kat for joining us for this episode of Live Your Balance. I'm sure you'll agree she shared some absolute gems there, not just from her own experience, but gems that she supports the amazing women in her community with as well. So big thank you. I'll leave Kat's links in the show notes below if you want to go check her out and have a look at some of her work. She has a podcast, the Put Yourself First podcast, which is a podcast that I've been listening to for quite a number of years now. I think near enough since it launched, and it's a weekly moment of bliss, I think. So, and you know what I also notice, because I talk quite fast, but I feel like Kat has such a calm and soothing tone of voice and kind of rate as well. She's not as much of a fast speaker as I am. I find it really calming to listen to that interview. So thanks again, Kat. We really appreciate it. And one thing that I wanted to touch on really for this Live Your Balance discussion is Kat mentioned that she finds writing and putting pen to paper to be something that's really helpful when she's feeling overwhelmed. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit more, because journaling and writing is something that I do. I know lots and lots of people really value putting pen to paper. Even with all the modern technology that we have, there's just something so cathartic about getting a pen out and writing in a journal or writing on paper and getting your thoughts out of your head. So I thought it would be helpful for us to dive into that a little bit more today and just have some chat about how writing and journaling can help us when we're feeling overwhelmed. So in my experience, and from having a look into some of the evidence that's out there on journaling and writing, it's really helpful for getting thoughts out of your head. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to, but getting thoughts out of your brain and onto paper can just help alleviate some of the overwhelm and the stress and the worry that those thoughts might be causing. Journaling and writing can also help you in making connections between thoughts, emotions, and actions, and this then contributes to helping us become more self-aware and more knowledgeable about our own experience. Not only that, but it's a great opportunity to get creative and let your ideas flow. I know I've had some of my best ideas when I've been journaling and just letting my thoughts and ideas flow onto the page. And actually, I've looked into creativity and journaling a little bit. And apparently the reason that journaling allows us to be more creative is because when we're writing, we're using the left side of our brain, which is the side of our brain that deals with analysing and rational thinking, which gives the right side of our brain, which is the creative side of our brain, opportunity to explore and adventure and just run wild, which is why often when we're journaling and writing, some great ideas come to us. So because Live Your Balance is all about supporting our well-being and creating a balanced life so that we can feel good, I wanted to touch on how we can use writing and journaling to support our overall wellness. So how can it help with feeling well, feeling good, and giving us that quality of life that we're looking for when we're thinking about creating a balanced life? Research that's been done into journaling tells us that it can reduce feelings of anxiety and depression. It's particularly effective for anxiety and can really aid us in becoming more aware of critical thoughts and helping us get to the root cause of whatever is causing us anxiety. Because when it comes to anxiety is a fear-based response and it's usually driven by some sort of perceived threat. So if we can hone in on what the actual root of the threat is, peeling back the layers and getting to the core issue, that can help us in reframing that threat and overcoming that anxiety, thus reducing the anxiety response that we experience. It can also, on the same vein, help with general stress management. And it sounds like this is where Kat uses it, on those times where she's feeling overwhelmed, she's got lots of thoughts running through her head. And this is how I like to use journaling as well. Because if journaling is effective for anxiety, stress is part of the anxiety family. And so it makes sense that it would help generally with managing stress if we can get our thoughts and emotions and things that are causing us general stress in life out of our thoughts and into paper. There's also research that suggests writing and journaling can be helpful in recovering from difficult life events or even trauma. When it comes to trauma is anything that changes your view of the world. We're in the middle of a global situation here with, dare I say it, I'll call it the C-bomb, the virus that shall not be named, which is causing lots and lots of high emotions. And this situation has the potential to change people's view of the world. So writing and journaling could be a really useful tool for navigating this tricky time and acknowledging our thoughts and emotions about it, getting them out of our head and helping us reduce anxiety and overwhelm with the situation that's going on around us that's very much not always in our control. The research that has been done into journaling suggests that in order to have the biggest impact on our overall well-being, it's best to be done daily or at least very much regularly. Journaling is something that I use pretty much every morning, at least in the week I do. I'm not always as consistent at the weekends, but I do try on at least one of the days to have a bigger journaling session where I really take a bit more time to just get my thoughts on paper. But it's been instrumental for me in recognizing and acknowledging and then changing thoughts and behavior patterns. I use the future self journaling method, which the holistic psychologist talks about. If you don't follow the holistic psychologist on Instagram, I highly encourage you to do that. But this has been a really powerful tool for helping me create more awareness of myself, particularly around patterns of behavior that I don't feel are particularly serving me. This is something, like I said, that I do every morning. It's part of my weekly morning routine alongside my gratitude practice. And it's been hugely, hugely valuable for shifting patterns of behavior, shifting my thought processes, crafting a mindset that I believe serves me, and generally just amplifying my self-awareness and my personal growth. Some other reasons why daily or at least regular writing or journaling might be really helpful in helping us step away from overwhelm and live your balance are that, number one, it's dedicated time for you. And if you ask me, balance is about having a mix of the productive stuff, the fun stuff, and the self-caring stuff in your life. And so this dedicated time for yourself could be really, really valuable in helping you support living your balance. Number two, it's a safe space to offload. Your journal is your private space. There's no one else there that will be judging what comes out of your mind and onto the page. You can get really, really vulnerable when you're journaling. And whilst vulnerability is really, really hard, it can be really valuable in helping us live a wholehearted life. And if you don't follow Brené Brown and her work on vulnerability, I highly suggest that you do so and immediately go once you finish listening to this podcast. And watch A Call to Courage on Netflix, because it is hugely enlightening when it comes to considering vulnerability and how we show up in a more vulnerable way in our lives. Thirdly, it can help you learn, whether it's learning about yourself and your experiences, about your relationships, or just about other people in general. This opportunity gives you valuable time to reflect. And reflection is a really important part of the learning process. I remember when I was at uni, we were encouraged to reflect all the time, and we use specific reflective models to do that, thinking about Kolb or Borton or Gibbs. But these are reflective models that guide that reflective process. You could use these as part of your journaling. In fact, I think I've shared on my Instagram before journaling prompts that are based around Borton's reflective model, which is my personal favorite because it's super simple. It's what, so what, now what. So we can use this opportunity to reflect to help us amplify our learning, get more from it, and think about what we do next and where we go from here. Number 4 is that it documents your journey. If we're regularly journaling and taking notes of our thoughts and emotions, we have something to look back on. We have something to help us measure the journey that we've been on, because sometimes it can be really, really hard when we're trying to move forward, but we're not necessarily seeing the progress that we're making every single day. If we have a journal that's going into detail about where we've been and how we've been feeling it on any particular day, we can look back at that and we can assess our progress. We can see how much we've changed. We can have a look at how much we've grown in the time that we've been doing this. And that sometimes might be the little boost that you need to help you keep going. Number 5, it can help you in working towards your goals, because making changes and moving outside of your comfort zone is really, really hard stuff. It can feel really, really uncomfortable and throw up lots of potentially unpleasant feeling thoughts and emotions. So journaling is an ideal opportunity to get those out of your head and onto paper so that they don't continue to be barriers to you moving forward and achieving your goals and getting to where you want to be in life. And finally, you get to choose how you use writing and journaling to serve you. You don't necessarily have to write for 20 minutes a day in your journal. You can do if you wish to, and you have the time to prioritize that. But you could just write yourself a list of things that you want to do that day. You could write down a brain dump of all the thoughts and ideas that are in your head. You could use it to write affirmations. You can use it to practice gratitude. Like we've mentioned, you can use it to reflect and learn. There are so many ways that you can use writing and journaling to help boost your wellness, both now and moving forward into the future. But I think it's important to remember that, as with all tools, journaling is a skill, and skills are like muscles. So you need to actually exercise the muscle in order for it to get bigger, stronger, and more effective at serving you. So this means you need to actively be engaging in journaling on a regular basis. And it's okay if it feels awkward and clunky at first. I just encourage you to stick with it, trust the process, and keep chipping away, because the evidence base tells us that this is something that can really, really help boost our wellness overall and ultimately then lead to us living our balance. I want to say a big thank you to Kat for taking the time to join us for this episode, and also a big thank you to you for listening. If you haven't yet signed up to the free 6-day Live Your Balance challenge, there is still time. The challenge starts tomorrow, Monday, the 30th of March. So there is a link in the show notes to join the email gang, and that will get you access to so many amazing free resources as part of the challenge. If you've enjoyed this episode of Live Your Balance, then please consider leaving a rating or review in whichever app you use to listen to your podcast. It's greatly appreciated and helps more people find the podcast so that more people can join us in living their balance too. That's all for today. So until next time, don't forget to keep living your balance.